Okay, thanks everybody for joining us today for our ACRL Digital Badges Interest Group Discussion Forum. My name is Emily Rimland. I am the current convener of the interest group, and I'm here at Penn State where it is almost 70 degrees outside and sunny in February. So I'm going to call this our spring meeting for that reason. And thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have our presenter today, Nate Otto. But we do just have a few kind of housekeeping things to get out of the way, so to speak, before we get underway. So first of all, I want to introduce the people helping me out. Kelsey O'Brien, she's one of our incoming co-conveners. She's going to be moderating the chat today. And as you probably saw, you can input your questions if you want to ask the speaker something. She's going to corral them, and we're going to stop in the middle and at the end for a Q&A. And then we also have Tori Raish here, who will kind of do the wrap-up at the end. She's another incoming convener. And Michael LaMagna is our past convener, who doesn't have a role today, but he's important to this group. So that's the leadership team for the interest group. And if you have questions, feel free to be in touch with us. Two other things briefly about sort of interacting with this group and getting information. We have two main ways of communicating. We have a listserv, which if you scroll up way to the beginning of the chat, I have a link to this if you want to join our listserv if you're not already on it. You can join it through ALA, sign up and get emails. The other thing we have is a LibGuide, and that is also in the chat. If you scroll all the way up, you should see the link, and I'm sure we'll add them again later. But the LibGuide has some information there about the group. It also has we'll put our recording from today as well as the last one we did is there, as well as some other information. So you might want to check that out as well. We'll be doing some quick polls today to just get a sense of our collective experience with badges that's in this group attending today. So when those appear, please go ahead and respond to those. Just a little bit more about questions. Kelsey, again, is going to moderate the chat, so feel free to put those in at any point you have them, and she's going to kind of collect them, and we'll ask them at the middle and the end. The presentation, as I said, will be recorded. We'll distribute it through the various listservs. You can also get it on that LibGuide if you would like. Those are kind of our main housekeeping things and our main communication mechanisms. Feel free to follow up with any questions. And then I can see that Kelsey has started the first poll, so feel free to respond to that so we have a sense of who's attending today and what your experience is with badges. And then while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker. I'll do an abbreviated bio since the full bio went out in the emails and things like that. But Nate Otto is here with us today. We're very happy to have him. He's the director of Open Badges Project at Concentric Sky, where he leads the development of the Badger platform for issuing and managing verifiable digital credentials. He's the lead author of the Open Badges specification within IMS Global Open Badges Workgroup, and contributes to technology standardization and coordinated development between companies in the digital credentials and related markets. Now, Nate, I have a question about one of your interests you listed. One was under alternative sports, you said you like ultimate. Is that ultimate frisbee?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to check.
Yeah, the people in the know just call it ultimate.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured, but obviously I'm not in the know, so I had to verify that. So we're really, like I said, happy to have Nate as our speaker here today. He's going to talk about open pathways and open badges. And from what I understand, are we still the first group to see a live demo of something new today?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's still
correct.
True?
We have given some webinars in the fall where we showed some design mock-ups and some early prototypes, but this is the very first day that we are presenting to anyone outside of our company the actual forthcoming Badger Pathway software.
That is so awesome. We are so glad to be the first recipients of that. So without further ado, go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, and before you get started, Nate, I'll just go ahead and close the poll. It looks like most people responded, so we can get a look at, hopefully, what everyone's familiarity is. Okay, I'm not sure, can everyone see what I shared?
Yeah, I can see it at least.
Okay. So it looks like many of us, actually, almost a third, have an established badge program at their institution. So that's really cool. If you're just getting started or if you're interested in badges, this is a great group to get involved with. So I encourage you to join our listserv if you haven't yet. Check out our LibGuide, and I'll pass it off to Nate.
Cool, thanks. Just letting my team know not to push any new patches to the demo server in the next hour.
Good call.
Okay, excellent. I know. So I am committing to doing a live demo. That is typically a recipe for things to go south in the tech world. So I do have some slides, and hopefully we will get through this and be able to see some pretty cool tech. So thank you so much, everybody, for the introduction and for inviting me to join you in the interest group spring meeting. It does not feel very spring-like here in Oregon today, but I'm sure we will get back there pretty soon and to our usual sort of Oregon dose of heavy rain that is pretty cold. So I'll go ahead and jump into my slides here, and we're going to start off with a quick overview of digital badges, which, because this is the Digital Badges Interest Group, you guys are already quite familiar with. And then we'll go from there to sort of the big idea of like why digital badges, and then we can start taking a look at the demo. Oh, it looks like I have the auto-advancing on my slide deck. That's fun. Let's see if I can manage to do that without. All right, can you see my slides full screen?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay, great, cool. So, like we said, I'm Nate Otto. I am the team leader for a whole bunch of different open badges related projects at Concentric Sky. Concentric Sky is a for-profit software development firm here in Eugene, Oregon. We have a little over 70 employees, sort of heavily skewed toward design and development, some award-winning user experience and interface design teams, and then just some of the best people I've ever worked with in terms of high-skill software developers, both on front end and back end, diving into new technologies, and just really excited to solve some interesting problems. So it's a great space to start thinking about what turns out to be a really complex piece of software that we're calling Bajor Pathways. So I'll start off with a little overview of digital badges and sort of how we think of them. This will be fairly 101 level review for most of you, I'm sure. Digital badge is a visual token of achievement online. Visual tokens of achievement existed long before online existed. You've, of course, seen patches on vests or sashes that indicate knowledge in building a campfire and all sorts of other skills you might earn in the groups that you're involved with. But even as far back as in the Middle Ages, people used the visual designs on clothing or on banners as a symbol of affiliation and respect within organizations. You wore the crest of your affiliation, political entity you were with, and that granted you privileges sometimes and let people sort of know what you were all about. Online, this achievement fits perfectly with how we build our profiles and identities online within our networks, such as gaming, for instance. Suppose you're on the Xbox platform or PlayStation or Steam, you've got a profile, and within all these different games, you've got achievements. Each of these achievements can be represented by a little visual symbol, and that symbol carries meaning within that community. The trouble is, when you implement badges in practice, you end up locking these achievements into one specific company's platform. So if you've got your Xbox Live achievements, you're in the Xbox ecosystem, and those achievements don't really speak to your identity outside of that system. Open Badges, which is a 5- or 6-year-old project, set out to change that. They thought, starting with the Mozilla Foundation, funded by MacArthur, gathered in I think a bar at the Mozilla Drumbeat Festival, which is now called MozFest, in Barcelona in that festival's first year. And they thought, let's sketch out on some napkins what it would look like to take this idea of digital badges and build a common standard for recognition of any educational achievement across all the different genres of participation, in your peer-driven spaces as well as your formal education experience and on-the-job training. What came out of that was the first versions of the Open Badges standard. And Mozilla led the way, starting an open community around collaborating to define what it looks like to recognize someone with a badge. That means that we've taken this idea of the visual symbol of achievement and made it concrete by putting a whole wealth of metadata inside the badge image. So there's a little clever technique to actually embed data within an image file itself, so that when you save it to your hard drive, it actually carries all this metadata with it. It's not just the visual component of the image. And there's a whole procedure for verifying the integrity of that metadata, that this badge was awarded to the entity, the email address usually, that it recognizes, and that it means what it says it means. Open badges are a very flexible standard. You can use them to recognize all sorts of different sized achievements, and everything from participation in a 1-hour webinar up to the completion of a high-level degree. And they can recognize any achievement within that range, describe pretty much anything that you can put into the metadata fields like name, description, and of course that you can symbolize with that visual image. Badges are portable, as I mentioned. You can store them sort of in that image file itself, move them between different systems that understand the Open Badges specification, and they're verifiable even as they move across those systems. So for example, if you downloaded one of your Xbox Live badges, that's not an open badge. So when you tried to do anything with that in a different system, it would just look like an image file. Yeah, you could put the image file on your profile anywhere you want, but it wouldn't carry any of the meaning of what that achievement meant in the system where it came from. Whereas open badges can carry all that meaning and the verifiability of it. And they can sort of phone home and someone can verify and check, oh yeah, this is all on the up and up. So, what's in a badge is, a whole bunch of descriptive metadata, but it kind of boils down to two main categories. And one is the criteria, which is what does it take to earn this badge? So here's a badge on the right that I got for presenting an Ignite talk in the fall. And then, the second is the evidence. What did this particular recipient do in order to earn this badge? And so the evidence on there, they actually attached a YouTube video of me giving my little 5-minute talk. And so that if I share this badge out, it not only shows that I was a presenter recognized by this trustworthy organization, the Technology Association of Oregon, but it actually has that video right there that you can access. Goes right along with the badge. History, I started getting into that a little bit. It's about 7 years old now, which is pretty exciting. I guess through 2018, I got to update my slide. Started with the MacArthur Foundation funding Mozilla for the first couple of years. After just a few years, the level of interest was so high that it needed to grow beyond just one organization in Mozilla. And so the Badge Alliance spun out with a number of the key original staffers from Mozilla forming its original core team to really become the first open standards body for open badges. And that means that organizations all around the world can contribute to the development of the standard, following a consensus-based process, so that when we think of a new feature that badges should do, we have that venue, the people to talk to, and the process to go through to actually turn that into an agreed upon standard that we can then go back to our own offices and implement in our software. The LRNG project spun out of the Cities of Learning project that started in Chicago in 2013 and is a great example of how open badges are used in a network. And then in beginning of 2017, open badges sort of graduated to the next level and moved under the care of IMS Global from the Badge Alliance. I was the interim director of the Badge Alliance briefly for about 1.5 years, and then I took care of prepping the spec for its sort of move to this next level of officialness, where it becomes a specification that is worked on by a membership standards body that focuses on education technology. So that's sort of where we are in open badges, which brings us to, sort of the big question. And I think all the people here are on this call because they're interested in digital badges. for different reasons. They seem to have a lot of potential. But I wanted to just sort of step back to the highest level and think, what is the point of using open badges? And share a little bit about our philosophy for why we think this technology has so much potential and why we're, as a for-profit software company, investing so much of our own money into building out some services that that we want to make available to all of you, many of them for free. What is it that we're trying to get at? And the idea, I think, boils down to credentials that actually have currency. They have value in a market. They can be understood and turned back into some kind of understanding of progress and real-world opportunity. They can form, a common language for educational achievements. This is something that your certifications on LinkedIn can't do, that all this data that's locked into these proprietary platforms just is incapable of doing, because that data can't follow you as you move around to the different spaces in which you construct your identity. So the question, if this is the goal, building credentials with currency, how do we get from here to there? Here, there are millions of badges issued as of the beginning of 2018. There are probably over 100,000 organizations and individuals who participate in the issuing component of badges. But how do we build the understanding of that, and how do we turn those achievements back into something that maybe an employer would look at or a college admissions officer would understand? And what I think, and what Concentric Sky is putting our chips on, is that currency requires community. And we need to build communities around particular definitions of badges and what's important to accomplish. So the value of an open badge, in order, it comes from community, but what are the three components of why you would trust a particular open badge? And so I think the first component is that you could understand what that badge means. The descriptive metadata gives you a good sense of what the criteria are to earn this. And maybe does this badge align to a particular educational objective, maybe a standard, component of the Common Core if you're at the high school level, next generation science standards, all these different standards out there. Is there some definition, some objective or competency that I'm looking for that this badge meets? How can I connect the learning that happens in the ecosystem where the badge originated with my ecosystem and my community? Second category is about the trust network around the badge. Who recognizes this badge and why? What do others find important about this badge? Do employers accept this badge as recognition of a particular skill that they are looking to fill? Does this issuer have a good reputation? And what are the components of the metadata that let me actually understand why I should trust it as the evidence of high quality? And I'll point out that these are not new questions to digital badges or to open badges. We're not solving a brand new problem. It's the same question at the broadest sense as, if you were looking at potential employees or applicants who had degrees from different institutions. You've got a gut sense that there are certain name brand institutions out there that connote a sense of reputation and quality on their credentials that a small state school might not. They don't have that name recognition or the community. They're not high up on the U.S. News or rankings of colleges. We can broaden our understanding of what a trust network is and how we build a trust network by building really good fundamentals and showing exactly specific trust questions, so we don't need to rely anymore on this sort of gut sense and broad reputation. We can actually understand, oh yeah, here's a specific ranking of issuers that I from someone that I trust who did the research, or here is a specific instructor in my field who trusts a specific badge as being a good prerequisite for the course. So that's the second category that I think leads to the value of an open badge. And the third is just the open badge's capability of verifiability. Is this badge, does it have integrity? So I'm going to stop there before I move on to the next slide and just see if there's any questions just sort of on this big picture idea of you know, what are badges and how do we use them. I can't see the chat while I'm sharing my full screen, so if any other moderators want to let me know if there's any questions popping up. You may be muted if you're talking.
Nate, this is Emily. I just put a question in. I'll just ask it myself. But you were just kind of finishing there on the last slide talking about trust around badges and whether or not it's verified. So I was curious if you could speak at all about blockchain and whether or not you've seen interest or work around using blockchain security to maintain a badge integrity.
Sure, yeah. So one way to get a great one-day increase in your stock value if you're a publicly traded company right now is to change your name to something blockchain. It's really hot technology right now. It has, you know, some incredible potential, but there's also a lot of potential that you know, there's just so much of hype around it as well. So it's important when you think about blockchains to break down the specific capabilities of blockchains and match them with use cases. That said, I think there are some clear use cases emerging in the digital badges market that would make blockchains an interesting part of a solution. For example, you know, so for folks who haven't looked into this too deeply, a blockchain is essentially a consensus record of data that exists. It's the prototypical use case is currency, and the data for currency would be transactions. You know, it's like a double accounting ledger of transactions that occurred. You think of like balancing your checkbook after a month. You've got that record of each of the checks that went out that are, you know, in the carbon copies in your checkbook, and your bank has a copy. The idea of a blockchain is a consensus record publicly held by the entire community about data that has occurred. So one use case for badges is to prove that a particular badge assertion existed as of a particular time by dropping a reference to it into this public consensus record. And so that gives an additional layer of verification on what Open Badges currently has that lets you, prove that, okay, so this issuer said this badge was issued on December 31st, 2017, but was it really issued, by then, or did they just backdate it, sometime in February later? If that badge has a little transaction on the blockchain, then you can actually tell, oh yeah, this thing was in existence. That has some drawbacks too, because what if you're operating in Europe and you've got a right to be forgotten type data privacy law? Is that even compatible with putting data about you onto a blockchain? Because data on a blockchain can never be deleted or modified by design. So there's costs to implementing blockchains, but there's also really interesting use cases. I'm going to be down at a workshop in Santa Barbara in early March called the Rebooting Web of Trust Workshop, where we're actually going to start diving in deep on some use cases, following up on some work that the MIT Media Lab did with a company called Learning Machine that are collaborators.
Thank you, Nate. We currently don't have any additional questions, so I think we're good to go.
Cool, sounds good. Maybe I'm explaining things well, or maybe it's incredibly boring. We'll see. No, so just a couple more slides, and then we'll get into the exciting live demo. So we went over sort of what the value of an open badge is. What are some reasons why someone might trust it? Why does it? What does it mean, and who already trusts it? Here's a little overview of just sort of what the game pieces are on the board. How do these badges move through these different systems so that you can actually make use of them? At the sort of origination of a badge, there's an issuer, and that would be recognizing an experience that happened. Maybe a competency that was mastered or program requirement met. And so education providers are in play on the issuer side. But I mean, both formal and informal. You could take a little online course, get a badge just as easily as you can get a badge for completing a unit in your formal K-12 or higher ed curriculum. The badge gets delivered to the recipient. The recipient then shows it via a category of applications called displayers, shows it to consumers, whoever those consumers might be for the badge. So if I've got a employable skill badge, I might put that as part of a resume or job application. I might use a displayer that would format the badges and help share them for that particular audience. If I was earning badges for participation in a sports club or something like that, I might put it on a profile on my social website where I interact with people there. But from wherever it's shared, it is possible to initiate the process of verification, which uses some Open Badges standard tooling to check back with the issuer, and either through the use of a cryptographically signed piece of data in the badge or by a reference to a URL that's hosted on the issuer's system, we can check the authenticity of the data and that the badge actually belongs to one of the maybe email addresses of the recipient. So let's take a look about how some specific tools fit into these different roles, and then I'll get into the live demo to show you exactly sort of like what this looks like in your browser. So the Bajor Issuer Platform is an example of an issuing tool, though there are several dozen different implementations of Open Badges issuing, and all of them produce a badge that's compliant with the Open Badges specification and deliver it to a recipient in some means. Bajor also has the ability to serve as what's called a backpack or host for badges, which represents the recipient. It's their place to store badges on the web. We feel strongly that users should be able to sort of choose their own piece of software to work with, so we don't force recipients to get issued a badge on Bajor to create an account there. But if they do, then the process is super smooth and they just see the badges they've been awarded right there without needing to take that portable image and import it into the system. From Bajor, you can share it to a whole range of what we're calling connected apps, which are a little bit more broader than the idea of displayer that I showed a minute ago. Connected app to us can represent something that uses a common protocol to connect to Bajor, and we hope in the future other backpack software we can implement a common protocol together. They all connect to Bajor, get the user's permission to pull badges from your Bajor backpack, and then does something with them, in potentially displaying as the function, potentially understanding, potentially granting access to a resource, like the very simplest to understand and maybe even too trivial to be worth it, but I'm not sure. The simplest idea that you could have for a connected app that might do this would be just a little like chat room service, and it connects to your backpack, pulls your badges, and then drops you into chat room for each of the badges you've earned, where you can talk to other people who are on the service who've earned the same badges. Just does something with your badges. I think like if we rely on badges, the use cases for badges that are about getting a job, and someone on average will get a new job, I don't know, every 2 years, every 5 years, somewhere between like 1 and 7 years, someone's going to get a new job. If their badges are only useful to them once in that period, then we're not going to have a successful software ecosystem. We need to figure out ways to make your achievements relevant in the things that you do on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. And so that means connecting them to your other applications. So we're building this connected apps protocol, and the Bajor Pathways platform is one of the first apps that's going to come out that will make major use of this protocol and do things to show you the value of the badges you've got, but also to connect back to that issuer side and award completion badges in response to badges you've got. So badges are inputs, badges are outputs of the system. So I've gotten this far without explaining what a learning pathway is. I've talked a lot about what is the value of a badge, what makes up that understanding, and those categories of what does it mean and who trusts it. These are the questions that Bajor Pathways hopes to answer, and we do that by allowing publishers, issuers, to define a structured set of learning objectives and then define the relationships between those objectives, whether they're competencies or program completion requirements or anything. Define the relationships between learning objectives in your ecosystem and badges that are available in the ecosystem. So those relationships consist of badges that are required for completion and also badges that may be automatically awarded upon completion. So a couple of use cases for learning pathways. The first one is tracking your progression through a competency framework that's aligned to standards. So for example, this is a screenshot from the app I'm about to show you. This would be what it looks like if you start defining a pathway based on the next generation science standards. It just has one element in there so far, but we'll get in to show you how you have rich options for structuring all this. The idea is to set out the competencies that matter to you, and then for each competency, you can define what are the badges and other child competencies that add up to this one. What do I consider completion of this competency? And then you can consider, maybe for some of them, I would like to award a completion badge myself that recognizes this definition of what I think competency means. So one use case is tracking users' progress through competency framework. And and when I say tracking users, that means letting learners understand their own progress and letting the educators they work with understand their progress as well, and letting consumers understand their progress. So giving learners the ability to share their representation of their experience via a pathway where it's all structured into a set of objectives that someone might already understand. A lot of people are familiar with the next generation science standards. If I share with you the list of badges I have showing how they relate to each competency in the next gen science standards, you as a consumer who understands that standard might understand those a lot better than if I just gave you a massive flat list of here's 150 badges I've earned. Now good luck taking a look and reading the story on each one. I don't think most employers have that much time to really dive into understanding big old flat list of things like that. Another use case is to track program completion. And this is one that we're really going to serve well right out of the gate with pathways, which is allowing educators who have students who are moving through a particular program, just setting out what's the progression look like? What are your different options that you could pursue here in terms of different badges that add up to completion? We've heard a lot of talk of the idea of guided pathways. Some of the states on the West Coast, community college systems are really diving into this. We're in Oregon, and the state legislature has just really taken a big step to move toward guided pathways for degree completion. But we're also working with California, where there's 114 community colleges, and that state is going pretty much all in on this idea of guided pathways. They're working with Concentric Sky to build a bunch of software, including this Learning Pathways app, to help students understand their degree progress, and specifically some complicated stuff like, suppose I want to plan a degree that involves a transfer from community college to the California State University system. What does that transfer pathway look like? Or what does a pathway look like if I want to sort of have a terminal degree at the community college? Or what does the pathway look like if I want to transfer to a different university system, like the University of California system has different transfer requirements? How do we visualize all this information? And so we built a system that is, right out of the gate, it can visualize simple pathways, and we're going to start being able to model some of the really, really complex rules that make up the existing completion requirements and transfer rules for these complex systems, like considering what a community college communications degree, how that transitions into a four-year degree in a related field. So the goal of building this system is for pathways to be able to answer these value questions. What does it mean? So tracking completion of program requirements and necessary skills to fill a position, or tracking someone's specialization across a competency framework. We hear a lot about this idea of the T-shaped student, where they have broad basic knowledge and skills and a specific specialization where they're really pushing the envelope and can really contribute to a field where they've developed deep knowledge. What does this mean question also means tracking about how badges relate to things your community cares about. If you've got a badge, what pathways is this badge on? Who accepts this badge? That brings us to the second question, who trusts it and why? Who's accepting badges for certain things, and what are the objectives or competencies that they're recognizing with badges? How do these ones compare with others that you might have earned? See where your badges can lead. What pathways are these on? you know, suppose I earn an Intro to Python Programming badge, and then I see that, oh, there's a software company in my town that uses Python and accepts this badge as, you know, one little component of a much bigger pathway. I can see the people who have successfully gone through that pathway prior, and, you know, see what educational opportunities are open to me to take those next steps. So, sneak preview, live demo. Hope everything works. Jump over to my browser here. So what we've got, we're starting with the Bajor platform, which was released about 3 years ago. It is now fairly mature software. It's open source. It's free. You can use it to award badges to as many people as you'd like, or you can use it to organize badges that you've earned yourself. I'm in a account here where I have some testing badges in addition to the sort of nice ones that I've earned, like this one for the Bologna Open Recognition Declaration. I signed this declaration that supports open recognition. Recommend you do as well. You can organize these into collections and share them. You can import badges from all sorts of different other issuing platforms in the world that are compatible with the Open Badges standard. And I can represent a staff member of a variety of organizations that I issue badges as. It takes my account a little while to load because I'm associated with 72 different users on the Bajor system. We've got somewhere around 5,000 organizations just using Bajor in our US data center, and we have data centers available in Canada, others coming around the world soon. So Bajor is just sort of an all-purpose system that awards badges and manages badges you've earned, and we're aiming to keep it at that simple level. We don't want to add a whole bunch more features to it, but what we have are connected apps. We have apps that do the cool features that are intelligent, like our Canvas plugin that awards badges automatically as students complete objectives, and then our Pathways application that recognizes completion. So here I am in the Pathways application showing you the what's called the authoring interface for Pathways. This is the example of a web literacy competencies framework, so use case for tracking progress across a competency framework. And I've just gotten started authoring this pathway. In fact, I haven't even published it yet. I could opt to publish it, and then it'd be available to anyone who's in our VPN and can get to our demo server. But let me show you a little bit about the structure of the pathway. It has this root element, which is the main sort of terminal node of the pathway. You move through from the little small leaf nodes over here up into their branching parent and then up into the parents. You can complete elements and then your progress sort of fills out as you go. But this is the authoring interface, so I'm not showing any specific user's progress at the moment. So I based this pathway on the Mozilla web literacy framework. Here it is. It's a great web framework that has just a bunch of different 21st century skills defined across several categories, showing how they interlink. And so I've set up in my pathway each of these three main categories: read, write, and participate. And for each, for write here, for example, there is the basic metadata of this competency. It has a name, a description, and then it has, pardon the slightly unstyled HTML and a little bit of this interface, has data about how it aligns to that standard in the world. It's part of the Mozilla Web Literacy Framework. Here's its alignment URL. There's one element left that I haven't yet defined on, I believe it's in right here. So indeed, remix is the last element. So I'm going to go ahead and author the remix component. It is a child of write here. So I'm going to add another element. You can see it's dropped into the tree here as a child of write, showing its organization within that part of the framework. And so its title, its name is remix, and then I can copy the text of the competency statement itself. And then I can get its URL, its alignment URL, which is optional, shows how it connects to that value in the real world. Multiple different pathway authors can sort of have their own definitions of competencies that align to the same thing. And then I'll give it a little short code for just abbreviated mobile displays. Go ahead and save that. Great. Okay, so now I've got a remix element. So what does this mean to me? How do users understand this competency, and how might they earn recognition in their completion of it? So for that, I can add a required badge. And so I've got some badges that are available from my issuer right here. These are ones that I have a little test issuer called Concentric Sky Middle School. It's not a real school. These are badges that I've already defined. I can also search badges in the world, like, let's see if there's any here. Okay, so the University of Notre Dame offers a video editing badge. So I'll go ahead and add that as an option to my element that can show completion, and you could go to that badge and read the criteria, and maybe you can go apply to it. You can add another one and see if I can find another good one here. You know, maybe you can earn this one. And so I can say, in order to complete the remix competency, just choose one of these 2 badges and go out there, complete the badge, put it in your Bajor backpack, and then your progress will show as completed on this element. I can add as many as I want, and I can set as many as I want to be required to complete. And then if I'd like, I can award one of my badges as a completion badge for finishing the remix element. Or I could wait to award a completion badge up at the right level, for instance, once you've completed all of the different children. So let's say you've got to complete all of the children elements, and I'm going to, again, then award you a excellent test badge. If I'd like to create a badge myself, for example, suppose I didn't find a badge out there in the world that's a good representation of Revise, and really probably the prototypical use case for Pathways would be a organization providing, here's all the learning opportunities we provide and the badges that we have, and you're going to just use the Pathways tracking tool through our own stuff. That second sort of guided Pathways use case that I talked about. So if I want to add a new badge, I can just click Create New Badge. It takes me right into my issuer in Bajor, where I can define, let's see, what I'm going for, revision. Let's see, a good icon for Revise. We can also, of course, upload your own image if you have a graphic designer to design them. Of course, once you go into production, you'll definitely want to. But for quick testing, you've got like a little quick generator, and usually with about this many clicks, you can find a great image that somehow relates to Revise. We're going to go with a bicycle. So we're going to try some bicycle tricks, then try it again. And then for criteria of what it takes to earn this badge, you can link to an external URL if you've got a web page that defines this criteria. That was sort of the original Open Badges approach. With Open Badges 2.0, you can embed the data right in the badge. So here's a criteria. Submit a paragraph describing how you revised your bike trick. Cool. Save that badge. Go back into Pathways. Oops, wrong tab for Pathways. And badges in my issuer badges. So I refresh them. Required badge. Oh, I have search. Revise on 2 rows. Badge there. So in order to complete this element, you've got to complete all of these badges. Do this bike trick badge, regardless of the fact that it might be a little bit dangerous, and then you'll be recognized with completion of that element. So an example of another use case for Pathways would be, like I said, that building a guided pathway. Here's what it takes to complete the components in my system. So let me jump back to my slides real quick, because we've got some future demos coming up where we're going to show different parts of the system, but I do have some design screenshots where I can show you already. So for example, what's coming before our launch, which we're projecting to be publicly launched before the end of March, so we're building incredibly rapidly from the authoring interface that you've seen already to completion of showing us these progress views and stuff. The goal is to be able to track group progress, individual progress. So these screenshots are from the group tracking views. So I've got a group selected, Dragon Squadron from that's following along this sort of vaguely Star Wars themed next generation science standards pathway. The different progress bars here show me how many members of the group have met the requirements of each element, and the progress sort of adds up toward the top of the pathway. It gets really exciting when you select an individual member and then compare that member to the group, in which you can see, how do members, are they getting ahead? Are they getting behind? Do I need to do some interventions? Okay, we've got a fashion show workshop coming up next week. Nobody's completed that, so I've got to communicate with everybody in the group to invite them. Hey, here's an opportunity to complete the requirements of this element, etc. Show you just a couple more peeks under the hood here in terms of, here's another view showing progress of a group on a pathway. You've got 100 members in this group. 13 of them haven't started making any progress on this element. 23 of them have completed the element. And then you've got sort of 64 who are in progress. This will allow you to drill down into seeing, who exactly has completed these different components of the requirement. As I mentioned, this pathway system is incredibly flexible to be able to handle a large amount of different ways you might want to configure requirements. 95% of programs are not going to have an element that is as complicated as this one, with not only required badges, but children that are required, and prerequisite elements, which are, if you need to, if you say that you've got to complete design over here before you can complete revise, that might totally make sense. I can set up design as a prerequisite on revise, so no users will be counted as complete here until they complete the design requirements, and then also all of the other requirements that are direct on this element here. Yeah, so overall, we've got a bunch of exciting stuff happening, and we think that Pathways will introduce a whole range of new use cases for digital badges that will actually start giving them that day-to-day value in terms of helping people understand what their badges mean, how they connect to those educational objectives in the real world, and where they can go from there. So one cool example of this, just one more quick use case, you can see I'm talking fast, getting to the top of the hour, is that we're working with a program here on a Ford Family Foundation sponsored grant called Elevate Lane County. This is a program offered by the Lane County Educational Service District, which serves all of the different dozen-plus school districts that are in our fairly large county here in Oregon. And what we've created is a learning pathway to employability in our local tech community. The pathway recognizes 21st century skills that are gained through assessments related to badges in-school achievements, as well as extracurricular activities and tech industry experiences, such as a job fair, a job shadow, and a 40-hour internship. If students complete the entire pathway across all 21 badges or so in the pathway, they get a guaranteed interview at a local tech community employer that is looking for, to fill an actual position, and that's coordinated through the Technology Association of Oregon and the Southern Willamette Valley. So a really exciting use case that shows high school students, what are your options for getting into this growing tech community. We have what's called the Silicon Shire here in Oregon, in our little forested valley. A bunch of tech companies are looking for talent. This community is growing rapidly. And we'd like to cultivate some of that talent from our local kids who are growing up, instead of just needing, posting big old applications that people might move from across the country to Oregon to fill. We're trying to award some high-value achievements, recognizing employable skills and experience. So recognizing experiences in this portable, verifiable way that has not been done before. This is stuff that doesn't show up on your high school transcript, but it's definitely valuable experience that you would like to bring with you to a job application, or even to moving into higher ed. So the pathway will allow students to understand not only, oh, hey, look, I've earned some badges for a couple of the things that I've done, and now I can share those, but it also will understand them, hey, what's my opportunities for participating in this program further? I can complete this guided pathway by, fulfilling X, Y, and Z. The next thing up is I got to fill out the application for the internship. Okay, cool, check, got that application. This enables not only students to sort of self-plan, but it also enables much more valuable conversations with your advisors. When I was in high school, I had maybe 2 or 3 hours a year at most with my academic advisor. How much of that do you spend just sort of catching up to a baseline level that Pathways could give you going into that conversation? Here's a program that I'm participating in. Here's my progress. So that's pretty exciting. The goal here is to build a tool that allows you to recognize achievements that matter to you in your community. This isn't forcing everyone into using a common standard. This allows you to define your own achievements, things that matter in your community. Eugene's tech pathway might look a little bit different from Pittsburgh's, for instance, or anywhere else in the country. These communities are different. Those differences can have a lot, we can have a lot of overlap, but it's important to be able to build networks around us that value achievements that are happening in our community. So some easy-to-use tools that do that. I recommend that you build in your networks, work with your partners to understand what those achievements are, but definitely start small. I started my work in badges studying a bunch of badge programs. We found that biting off more than you can chew was, one of the biggest risk factors for not having a successful, sustainable program. So try a pilot program first, which brings me to one more thing. Open Pathways is a common standard that this is based on. Bajor Pathways, the service, will be launching. We're hoping by the end of the March, if we type all of our code as fast as we can. So that one more thing is that you can start a pilot program. You can track up to 1,000 students a year for only $495. So come check that out. If you have any questions, go ahead and send us an email. You can either contact me directly or send us a note at badger@Concentric Sky. Learn more. If you're going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona next week for the IMS Global Digital Badges and Credentials Summit, we'll see you there, and we'll be able to show you the other part of the system that I didn't live demo today, which is that progress tracking component. But that's my presentation. Thanks so much for joining me, and we'll have the slides available for you to take a look at.
Thanks so much, Nate. We do have a few questions that we might be able to get through a couple. I know some people might have to leave soon, but first one from Kevin Steves. He was looking into badges for help with motivation, however, finding that a lot of businesses maybe don't accept badges in place of other experience, such as transcripts, certifications, degrees. So he was wondering if you have any ideas or suggestions on finding businesses that they could work with in order to, as they're thinking about creating their badges.
Great question. Short answer is that this is a common problem. You're not going to just invent a credential out of thin air and then have consumers for it naturally. So try and use credentials that do have value to at least sort of 2 of the 3 roles in the community right off the bat, which are issuer, earner, and consumer. And so you're looking for that consumer value. Badges can still be pretty valuable even if they just facilitate communication or understanding of progress between the issuer and the recipient. Pathways does a great job at helping build on that value. I think that there's, if you're talking about just badges for motivation, this is a 30-year debate about, what are the things that are motivating about a educational experience and the rewards that might be involved. Badges have the potential to go, sort of beyond the divide between extrinsic and intrinsic rewards and, actually give you a token of something that you can then use for other things later. But yeah, finding those employers who accept a badge sort of off the bat is tricky. I'd start by showing students how you accept it yourself. How do you understand their progress through the values that you've established in your community, maybe just your classroom. How do you understand progress within your classroom, within your institution, across departments in your institution particularly? A lot of cool use cases there, like for libraries awarding badges that for things like copyright knowledge or that are required in your writing class, but you don't have to take that library course over and over. A lot of things can be done before you get that external endorsement, and then the external use cases often arise after you've built that internal value.
Okay, we have a couple sort of related questions. One being, can you only select badges from other issuers if they're open to anyone to complete? And then also a question, how are you sourcing badges from outside Bajor to attach to path elements? So I think those are kind of related in that wondering sort of how you bring in badges from outside. Does the issuer have to set that?
Sure. So I know Justin Pitcher from Chalk and Wire, excellent Open Badges implementer, also in the issuer and backpack displayer roles, just like us. They've got badges that maybe want to appear on Pathways. We have a directory service that knows about a bunch of badges in the world. It has, it's kind of like a search engine for badges. We've not scraped yours yet, Justin. So let us know if we want to get your badges in there. It's called Badge Rank. We have it up on api.badgerank.org, and we're going to make this a public service. Don't go there yet because it's got a practically broken service from 3 years ago that we have on the front end there right now. But we've got a directory, and we're going to be adding more and more badges to it. If you know about any badges that aren't in there, we can definitely add them and figure out a way to work with the publisher to get them into the directory. Cool, Justin's interested in contributing, going to do it. What was the other part of that question?
Let's see. So Justin was asking how you're sourcing badges from outside Bajor, and then Lindsay was just asking if you can only select badges from other issuers if they're open to anyone to complete.
Oh, sure. No. So you can select a badge that to be required. Actually, Pathways has no idea whether these badges are open to people to complete or not. Okay. That's kind of impossible to tell at like in a machine readable level right now. I recommend like looking at the metadata and selecting badges that are sort of open to complete, but that's not necessarily the only use case. We just have a directory of badges that you can search from by various different metadata fields. I think the most of the compelling use cases for the short term will be around building pathways where sort of all the badges are an option that you can go complete. But there are some use cases that, especially if I had a Python skills for programming pathway, and I would divide up the different parts of the workflow that our Python developers go through, I could search for a wide variety of badges, and I might pull in a bunch of them, but I wouldn't set, you don't have to complete all of these to complete an element. These are just an example of something that might contribute to your skill. One of the use cases that we're not going to target right at launch, but that I'm very interested in sort of spending another 6 months on and hitting later this year, is this idea of like an employment skills pathway where an employer posts a job profile, says, here's what it takes to be a entry-level, a junior developer in Python at Concentric Stack. Great. Here's got a bunch of skills, but we know that we don't know about all the badges that we might accept as an employer out there in the world. So we want you as the recipient to be able to remix this pathway yourself, show us the experiences that you've had that add up to completion, or that add up to what you think of as proficiency in each of the things that we're looking for, and then be able to present that pathway back to us as a structured storytelling tool, so that we don't have to look at a list of 150 badges you've gotten and struggle to understand how they fit into our categories, but you've already told us a little story about how they fit into each category. So that's something that we'll build a workflow for later. The other part of that is, if I had been thinking, I would have proposed another poll question here, which is what % of the experiences in your life, the educational experiences that you've had, audience, are badged? Is it 1%? Is it 0.01%? We're operating in an environment where a very, very tiny proportion of the line items that you would put on your resume are associated with a digital badge at present. And so we need to build software that understands that and is able to include that reality as we think of, what does competency mean? We're starting with a Badger pathway system that all progress has to be measured in badges somehow, but we're totally open to use cases that involve self-issued badges, where you award yourself a competency badge with evidence and then go seek endorsement from the peers that you work with, for instance. All sorts of workflows to account for the reality that it's going to be decades before we get to, 25% of all learning experiences are badged.
Okay, and I'm aware that we are out of time. We have one additional question. Do you need to get going, Nate, or do you have another minute?
I have another minute, and thanks everyone for hanging over a little bit. But if you have any questions, if you need to leave right away and you need to contact me, totally send me a message. I'll answer you offline. But I can take one more question now.
Okay, yeah, we've got a couple of minutes, and then we have to let someone else get in this room. A question that I think will also address Anne's question from Stuart. What's the status of Pathways as an open standard?
Cool. Stuart, I appreciate you came and joined us on the webinar. I like working with you on a lot of open standards. Please join us and make this an open standard. We've contributed the basic idea to IMS Global. It will be probably several more months before we start up an official working group in that venue, but we are interested in collaborating across several different venues to describe what a pathway structure means. We're totally interested in making this an open standard. So, we have a couple other implementers already who are interested in using just the model that we've put out for V1, but we need to take this through the standardization process. The key thing that I think that we need to recognize on standard making around pathway is that the pathway is not made up of badges. The pathway is made up of the structural elements are the things that you value in your community, and then there are relationships between those and the badges. And if we can all agree on a standard that sort of embodies that principle, then we're going to have a very productive standardization in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for coming. Tori, I don't know if you wanted to get a quick word in, but we do have to let the next group get in here.
This is Emily. Tori's actually having sound issues, so yeah, we'll just do a really quick wrap up and say thank you, Nate, so much for this information. It's been a great presentation. We'll definitely be in touch if we have questions, and we will post the recording to this on the listserv on our website. I just put the link to join the listserv again in the chat. So just a reminder to sign up for that if you would like this information by email in the future. And we look forward to talking again soon and hearing more updates about all the information you presented today, Nate. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.